Okay, so we are starting to record this. So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for attending what is now Seminar 7, and it's What Happens at 18. I am just now going to start to share the screen so that you can see the presentation. So just bear with me while I do that. Thank you. And I'm hoping now that everyone is able to see the What Happens at 18 seminar. Any problems, let me know. Lovely. Okay, so I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping before we start. So normally the seminars will last 1 hour. That will depend on questions, obviously. So please, this is really important that you have this opportunity to ask any questions. So if there's anything you would like to ask, we will have some questions session at the end. But you can use your hands up, or if you are obviously not on mute, you can ask a question then. Very relaxed, put it in the chat. We can do it as we go along if that's easier, but otherwise we will definitely have some opportunities to do questions at the end. I'll be sharing screen today so that we can go through the presentation. If you do need to leave, we fully understand. Obviously, you can use the leave button to do that. If we ask just to keep your microphones on mute, just so that we avoid any background noise so everyone can hear okay. Mentioned about the chat, mentioned about raising your hand. And if you don't want to be on the video, that's no problem. Obviously, as you all have, you can turn that off. So we'd like to introduce ourselves, meet the team. Today's seminar is going to be hosted by Dagmar, Sian, and myself. Dagmar, could I ask you please to introduce yourself?
Yep, hi, I'm Dagmar and I'm the Local Authority Liaison Manager, and I do have contact with some of you at the local authorities to answer questions, help maybe get statements to you, remind you of your outstanding data, submissions, and just things like that.
Thank you, Dagmar. Sian, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sian. I work on the account recovery programme. So what that means in a nutshell is I speak to young people day in, day out, helping them complete applications with their queries about how they can claim their accounts. I often speak to local authorities as well, so you might have seen a few emails from me or had phone calls from me, but that's what I do. I help the young people actually get their accounts.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dagmar. Thank you, Sian. My name is Sue Parsons. I'm the Operations Manager here at the Share Foundation. Really, my role is to really help and support with the day-to-day activities of the running of the charity, so working with all the teams. So let's get going. Topics we're going to cover today: introduction to the Share Foundation. Has young people located their accounts? So really that's a question, because if they haven't, we can help I'll help explain how they can do that. The resources available to locate the account, unclaimed accounts, including the bilateral agreement, problems that could arise when young people are trying to claim their account, and the Care Leaver Covenant, how this can help young people. And we will have some questions and further discussions at the end. So an introduction to the Share Foundation. First of all, I'd just like to say that all our costs are covered by the government or a philanthropist. So you may all be aware that we actually are contracted by the Department for Education to administer the Junior ISA and Child Trust Fund scheme for young people in care. So everything that we do from an admin perspective in terms of the running of the charity is paid for by the DFE contract or a philanthropist. So what we want to really advise you of is 100% of the money that is given to these young people through the contributions that we receive does go to the young people's accounts. I think that's really important to mention that, because we are quite unique in that way. Many charities obviously rely on taking a percentage of money that comes in, but our role is a contract paid for already by the government, and so 100% of those contributions will be to the young people's accounts. Now, the Share Foundation, we are a registered charity, and we've been operating since 2005. And in those days, we were raising funds for child trust funds for young people in care who were located in the local area. The Child Trust Fund scheme ended in 2011. So that meant that really the actual government was the government was not actually giving any more money into long-term savings accounts for young people in care, because the Child Trust Fund scheme finished. Now, that Child Trust Fund scheme was based on a date of birth. So any young person who was born from the 1st of September 2002 up to and including the 2nd of January 2011, if they were born in the UK and someone's claiming child benefit for them, they are very likely to have a child trust fund. But when that scheme ended in 2011, well, the Share Foundation with Barnardo's and Action for Children lobbied the government to say, okay, you've ended the scheme, but what about young people in care? What about long-term savings for young people in care? And the government did actually introduce the Junior ISA scheme and the Junior ISA scheme for young people in care. So we, the Share Foundation, were contracted to administer Junior ISA accounts, so open and administer Junior ISA accounts for young people in care at that time. Now, that contract then widened in 2017, and we then took over the child trust funds, where there's no one in a position of parental responsibility for looked after children too. So before the 2017, the official solicitor and accountant of court would have been looking after young people in care's child trust funds. And it was decided that obviously the Share Foundation already had the contract for the Junior ISA. It would make sense that we also had the child trust funds. So all the data from the official solicitor came to the Share Foundation in October 2017. We started that process too. Many of you may remember as local authorities that we were reconciling those accounts, finding out if the young people were still in care, trying to make sure whether we can match these accounts to the young people that we have on our records. So there was a lot of work that was undertaken at that time when we took over that responsibility. In 2023, our contract was renewed for another 4 years. So we still continue to do the work undertaken and under the Department for Education contract. So the long-term savings accounts, we have the Junior ISA and we have the Child Trust Fund. So both are long-term savings accounts that are set up by the government, were or are available to all children under 18 in the UK. So as explained before, a Child Trust Fund is based really on the dates of birth. So anyone in those Child Trust Fund years, born in those Child Trust Fund years in the UK, they're likely to have a Child Trust Fund. Anyone outside of those Child Trust Fund years are likely to have a Junior ISA if they fit the criteria of the Junior ISA scheme, which I will go through shortly. So the Child Trust Fund scheme, as we said before, closed for new accounts, and that's when the Junior ISA scheme took over. We can only manage the Child Trust Fund accounts where a local authority or healthcare trust confirm that there's no one in a position of parental responsibility. So what that actually means is, because the Child Trust Fund was set up around the young person, around the time the young person was born, potentially someone would have done that. So somebody with parental responsibility may have opened that account and they got the voucher through the child benefit scheme. Now, when a young person comes into care, after they've been in care for a year, a local authority would submit them on their regular data submission. And we would identify a young person, date of birth, do they need a junior ISA, or could they have a child trust fund? If they're born in the child trust fund years, we will then go back to the local authority or trust and say, okay, is there anybody in a position of parental responsibility that you deem are managing that account effectively? If the answer is yes, the Share Foundation do no more. We can't do any more. We don't need to take control of the account. The local authority or trust are satisfied that actually somebody is managing that account. And if somebody wants to make contributions to that account while they're in care, then that can be undertaken with the local authority and that person with parental responsibility. However, if the local authority or healthcare trust come back to say, no, they don't believe there is anybody, then the Share Foundation will go to HMRC to obtain the Child Trust Fund account details and URN. And we will then go to the account provider and advise that we will be being the registered contact until such time as anything changes. So that's really what we mean, and that is what's provided to us by that local authority or healthcare trust. That will determine the answer to that question as to whether the Share Foundation then start to administer that account, or if you're happy with the fact that, you know, whoever is doing that well, then that's fine, that's no problem. So just to explain that really, because we do have questions on that. What's the RA status? What does that mean? Anyone can contribute to a junior ISA or child trust fund. Obviously, they need to know where it is. Where the Share Foundation are the registered contact for those accounts, we can do the contributions. So contributions come to us and we then make sure that they go to the young people's accounts, 100% of the contribution. So has the young person located their account? I'm now going to pass over to Sian.
Lovely. So young people locating their accounts. So when a young person is in care under the local authority and have been made known to us here at the Share Foundation, letters are issued to our main named contact at the local authority or healthcare trust for onward distribution to the young person in care in order that they can find out about their account and then obviously at 18 claim it. Now, the reason letters are sent to our main named contacts for onward distribution is because we, the Share Foundation, do not hold addresses for young people whilst they're in care. So the local authority or healthcare trust would have the most up-to-date information about where that young person is currently residing. So letters are sent at 16 because a young person has the legal right to find out about their account at 16. And that letter is obviously telling them a link and they can do an online application with us. Now, another letter is then sent again at 17 and a half if the young person hasn't actioned the letter at 16, so hasn't made contact with us, hasn't done an online application to find out about their account. So I just want to tell you those. And then obviously approaching 18 checks. Now, these are issued by the Share Foundation. Now, this is where an account was not be able to set up before the young person turns 18. So if a young person on a data submission is 17 and 10 months, that does not give us enough time to open a junior ISA, and that would be a junior ISA only because it's too close for them turning to 18, so they will receive a £200 cheque. However, the Share Foundation are currently reviewing our cheque process and hope to change this to online payments so in the early part of this year. So this is already now in place for retrospective payments. And talking about retrospective payments, if it is found that a young person was eligible for a junior ISA, but was not submitted on the data and no account was opened, a retrospective report is obviously talked about, and data submission and a form submitted from the local authority to us here at the Share Foundation, and those payments are paid directly into the bank account of the young person. So the form would request a bank statement from the young person, and it's really important, I just want to reiterate at this point, that names match. So the name that the young person is known by on the data submission must be the same as the name they have on their bank account. I know it seems that lots of young people now seem to be able to open bank accounts in their preferred name, but from a legal perspective, it's always really important that that bank account matches the name that they are known to us. Now, each local authority can have access to a valuation report, and this will obviously detail every account that the Share Foundation have open or had responsibility for. I'd just like to also highlight at this point that there is Seminar 6 that you can attend, which tells you all about the valuation report, and many of you might find that that's worth attending as well. We, the Share Foundation, can provide our main named contacts at the local authority and healthcare trusts with a list of young people who have completed the process to locate their account to date, if that is helpful to you. So the letters that are issued to the local authority and healthcare trusts for a young person, they are very specific. So this all goes back to the very beginning where you submit the data. So whether we're talking about a junior ISA, a child trust fund, payments, the data is key. So for young people who are eligible for a junior ISA, because we, the Share Foundation, administer that account, they will receive a letter with this specific link. And this is relevant for a young person who has been in care or is in care, who is eligible for a junior ISA. And when they complete that process, if matched, a letter is sent to the young person to the postal address they supply on the online application, so that they can then contact their account provider and claim that account. If it's a MyCTF, so this is relevant for a young person in care or who has been in care, who has a child trust fund, where we, the Share Foundation, have been the registered contact, and therefore we actually hold the account details. Once again, once they complete that form, if it's matched, a letter is sent directly to the young person to the postal address they supply on the online application, and then they would need to contact the account provider to claim their account. Now, the next link is Find CTF. Now, this is relevant for a young person who's been in care or is in care, who has got a child trust fund, but where the local authority or healthcare trust have advised the Share Foundation that there is or was a responsible adult. Now, when we complete those applications, when the young person completes them, we initially would put them through our database because we work with the tracing group. So if we can make a match, the young person would receive an email telling them who their account provider is. But if we can't make a match, we will need to go to HMRC. So a copy of their form is issued to the young person for them to sign and date, send back to us, and then we send that on to HMRC for them to investigate. And then once we get a response from HMRC, we will email the young person directly. HMRC should also send them a letter, but sometimes that doesn't happen. It's also used for young people who are not in care nationwide, who are 16 plus, with a national insurance number, which is part of our Child Trust Fund recovery campaign. So that's Find CTF. I just want to make another reminder at this point. The links are for the young people to complete themselves. It is their data that they are submitting, so they need to be completing the form themselves. It is not for parents or guardians or third parties to complete on a young person's behalf. If a young person has struggles or needs support, they can always call us here at the Share Foundation. That's something I do day in, day out. I help young people when they say that they've got difficulties. It could be that they've got dyslexia or something like that. We will always support them to help them complete a form. It's absolutely not a problem. But once again, we can only speak to the young person because it's their information, their data, their details. Unclaimed accounts. So reasons why a young person at 18 might not have claimed their account. And this can include difficulties with name changes. Once again, as mentioned a little bit earlier, it's really important that a young person is submitted to the Share Foundation, that they are using the legal name as per their birth certificate, as per their legal information. Because if a young person, for example, fills in a form and they put Joe Bloggs, but the young person is Joseph Bloggs, and their middle name is Joseph Edward Bloggs, it's really important that they are telling us all that information, that whilst they might like to be known as Joe, they need to tell us what their real name is, Joseph, because that's probably what accounts would be opened in. So it can be difficult. If a young person has changed their name legally, they are going to have to be able to produce that legal documentation. So if a young person has had a name change, that's absolutely fine, but they will need that legal documentation to support it. Now, going back to why it's really important, if from day one those data submissions are correct, that means that when we are opening, for example, junior ISAs, they will be opened in the correct legal name. And then also, if a young person has been put forward to us and you want us to take control of a child trust fund, again, as much information per their birth certificate, per their legal name is really important, so that we go to HMRC and we are obtaining the correct details from HMRC. Once again, you could find that two young people have been born on the same day, both with the same names, but that middle name might make all the difference. So again, if you can provide us with as much information from day one, it makes the journey of claiming accounts easier if the names are matching.
Sorry, Sean, I was just going to say, I see we've got a couple of questions already popped up in the chat. So if a young person is non-verbal, can the appointee call on their behalf? And as long as someone who is, Dagmar's answers. So as long as someone is with the young person, we can help by helping to complete the application online for them. So I think that's just great to share that. If anyone else hadn't seen that chat, then yes, obviously we appreciate there are circumstances where a young person needs supporting, but ideally, obviously, we don't want to be doing the form for somebody who is not the young person. So the young person needs to be present, I would suggest we say, and just really an understanding as well of the situation, we can then support them. Sorry, thank you, Sian.
No worries. So this moves on nicely, I suppose, to limited capacity. So when a young person is regarded as having limited capacity, there are a great deal of issues around young people with limited capacity claiming their child trust funds. Now, many account providers would ask for a court order of deputyship, which we are aware is very expensive. So we would suggest that the person who is the appointee or deputy for the young person does still contact the account provider, because many are using common sense in terms of helping with claiming accounts. However, our understanding is that HMRC do require a deputyship court order. Now, we would also suggest an ad hoc approach to this in terms of how the Share Foundation or HMRC could assist with the locating of an account, and then they would need to contact the account provider in terms of claiming. The Share Foundation are more likely to be able to support locating an account where we have been the registered contact, but we could require the involvement of our main named contact at the local authority in those cases. And once again, Find CTF link is only for a young person to complete. And in these circumstances, with a young person with limited capacity, it cannot be used by a third party. So if you do have questions in those sorts of situations, obviously you can come to us for some guidance. We are more than happy to talk you through it and how you would need to proceed. HMRC will not provide a third party with the information. So if those forms are completed by a third party, you'll probably get a call from myself or my colleague Rena going, we can't proceed any further because the young person hasn't signed the form. You've made us aware that there's an issue. So it's really important that we have those conversations, because we would then suggest that the appointee, or with the deputyship, court order or lasting power of attorney, would then need to write to HMRC directly and provide documentation proving that they have appointeeship or deputyship, so that the account can be located for the young person. I've just realised I haven't talked about people who are not eligible for child trust funds. Now, not eligible response when we're doing responses with HMRC can mean that a young person may have been born overseas. Now, if it's definitely that they haven't got a child trust fund, the Share Foundation can open a junior ISA, assuming that the young person fits the eligibility, even if they were born in the child trust fund years. Once again, this all goes back to data. So when a young person is being submitted, if they were born in the child trust fund years, but they were not born in the United Kingdom and they are a UASC, you need to alert us to that on your data submission. Okay. I'm now going to pass you to Dagmar, who's going to continue.
Right, good afternoon, everybody. Deceased young people. It is important that when the data is submitted, that you notify us as deceased and not in care, because if they're noted as in care, a status change letter will be sent to the local authority, and that can be quite upsetting. So they must be classed as died or deceased on the data submission. That information then gets passed to me, it will get passed to me, and then I will be in contact with the local authority and the main contact at the local authority to send out the beneficiary letter, which is telling them where the account is, but there'll also be a claim form there that they need to complete. That information then has to come back to myself with the death certificate, the claim form, which will then be passed on to the account provider. I can certify the death certificates, and the originals will always be sent back, recorded and signed and tracked postage. We don't send it normal post because there is a fear of those documents being lost. Once the information has been sent to the account provider, it's usually about 10 to 14 days that they will be in touch with you to arrange payment for the estate of that young person to the beneficiary. If you have the information for a young person, but we haven't had time to open the account and you've sent the information through to us as deceased, I can then send a letter with the information, what they need to do and how to proceed, because that information will have to go to HMRC, and they will need a copy of the death certificate and a copy of a birth certificate and a covering letter just explaining the situation. If you do send stuff to HMRC, do not send originals because they will not be returned to you. In prison, we get notified by the local authority that this young person is in prison. If they are over the age of 18, then I can send out the maturity form either to the main contact or directly to that young person at the prison. if I send it directly to the young person at prison, I do need their prison number and the address of the prison, and there will be an application form, maturity form, where they need to complete it and then send it back to the account provider. If they don't, well, young people in prison will not have access to the internet. If they have no access to the internet, I can send it to maybe a social worker who goes to see that young person. They then can complete the application form, sign it with a copy of the bank statement, and send it to the account provider. If there's no bank account, then there are other arrangements that we can do. They may have a prison bank account where the money can be paid into, and they can maybe draw down on it weekly, or we can send the money to the local authority, who then pass it on to the young person. That's it. That's it for me. Must be back later.
Back to me again. So problems that young people encounter or may encounter whilst claiming accounts, bank accounts. It's quite often, and we are quite aware that young people sometimes don't have bank accounts. So it's really important that we can support them. So if a young person cannot open a bank account, and quite often we find that young people, especially unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, sometimes experience difficulty in this area. It may be that the Share Foundation could pay either a retrospective payment or an approaching 18 payment of £200 directly to the local authority or healthcare trust. Now, there is an appropriate form to use, and this is the form where bank account not available, Form 1. That would be completed by the local authority or healthcare trust, and it would also be signed by the young person too, to agree that the local authority healthcare trust can receive the funds on their behalf. The Share Foundation would then pay the local authority or healthcare trust that £200 for that young person. Then Form 2, which is the follow-on form, is then signed by the young person to confirm the receipt of monies, and this form must be returned to the Share Foundation within 1 month. Now, just so you are aware, if this does not happen, the Share Foundation will chase. Now, if this goes over 1 month, the Share Foundation may remove this particular facility for this particular local authority or healthcare trust, or you may incur a new process where the local authority or healthcare trust would have to pay the young person first, and then only when the local authority or healthcare trust supplied evidence that the Share Foundation would reimburse the local authority or healthcare trust. Now, we are really aware that some banks have really started to help care leavers. So if a young person wants some advice, or your social worker is helping support a young person to open a bank account, and they're wanting to know which bank accounts or which banks are really supportive, you can always contact us, and we can give you some information there to help. I think that's actually coming a bit later as well. Identity documents. Again, this can be really difficult. Now, if a no ID, if a beneficiary of a junior ISA account cannot provide appropriate ID, funds again may be paid to the local authority or healthcare trust for them to pass to the young person. Once again, the form will need to be completed, and once again, payment must be made to the beneficiary within 1 month. It's a similar form as mentioned above. However, the form and the process is between the account provider and the local authority and healthcare trust. So that's where we can have that. Now, we also may encounter discrepancies, and this can be discrepancies with the name or date of birth provided on the data versus the name that the young person uses. And we find this a lot, especially with junior ISAs. So again, it could be that myself or my colleagues might contact you saying, we've had an application from a young person, but we've got a bit of a discrepancy with either a date of birth or a name, and we would obviously be seeking your support and guidance in those respects to help the young person. Obviously, when a child trust fund was set up, if a young person has changed their name, so if they've been adopted, if they've had a legal name change by deed poll, a young person's going to need to be able to prove that. They can't just say, well, I've decided I want to be called, I don't know, Queen Alicia of Wadston, just because it sounds good. They would have to prove that they've had that legal name change. So again, it's really important, as I mentioned earlier, that bank accounts and young people's names are the same, because it makes that journey so much easier. If, for example, a young person has got to provide that documentation, we would always suggest that certified copies rather than originals are sent. This is just so that in case post and things gets lost, it's much easier trying to, get hold of another. You can always make another photocopy rather than trying to find out where an original's gone. A local authority or healthcare trust may need to support a young person by confirming their identity if no documents are available. So we are aware of these situations. Now we're talking about account provider known problems. Now we are aware quite often, especially with child trust funds, that one of the security protocols that account providers use is the address where the young person was living when the account is opened. Most people can't remember where they were living 18 years ago, and this is very prevalent with obviously young people in care, and there can be reasons legally why a young person shouldn't necessarily have that information. So we are working with account providers to do that, to obviously make that known that that is a problem, and they are listening, but sometimes this can still be an obstacle. We often get where account providers might refer a young person back to the Share Foundation. So this can be for lots of different reasons. It could be that they have done, for example, a application with HMRC directly, and actually they've been told their name of their account provider is one thing, and then that account provider's telling them that they need to speak to us here at the Share Foundation. That's probably because they've not done the application with us, and we might hold the most up-to-date and correct information. So that's one thing there. It could also mean that a child trust fund account has been transferred to another provider. Now, obviously, when the child trust fund scheme started, there were over 40 different providers. Some of those providers decided they didn't want to do child trust funds anymore, so they'll have been moved to another provider. So again, sometimes it can be a bit like a jigsaw, trying to put the pieces together so that we can get to the end result. Again, we are always happy to support. Now, we also are aware that a young person may require further support from a local authority if there are limited documents for them. And quite often in the last situation where a young person has been told that the account provider no longer holds the account, if we've not been the registered contact, we also won't know where that is. And in those cases, that young person's going to have to go back to HMRC, and they would need to write a covering letter and explain the situation. And obviously, they would possibly need to provide ID documents and things like that as well. Again, if that's the case, we would always, provide you with the contact details for HMRC if that's needed, and we are more than happy to talk you through that process. Back to Dagmar.
Right, just before I go on to the bilateral agreement, Carol, you've asked a question about payments for the young people where we're paying to the local authority. I'm going to come back to you on that one and just find out if there is any other things that we can do to get these payments to these young people that are in prison. So if there is any of the other local authorities that want more information regarding young people in prison, please just drop me an email and I will get back to you. Right, bilateral agreement. This is a project that's been going for a couple of years now, and it's really starting to gain momentum now. This is where we've had a legal agreement signed off by lawyers, Department for Education, and the Information Commissioner's Office. This is also an agreement between the Share Foundation and local authority and healthcare trusts. This is where I send you the agreement. You then look at it, pass it on to your compliance department or your head of services, who will then sign that bilateral agreement and email it back to me. It's okay emailing it. I will then get to the main contact all the unclaimed data for the 18 plus care leavers. And I would like to have the last known address, any deceased, so we can get the beneficiary letters out to the main contact. Anyone of your young people that have gone missing or been deported, anywhere there's no data available at all, I still need to have that information, especially if it's protected or confidential. In that case, I can actually send the letters to the local authority to be passed on to that young person, because there may be restrictions on the account. Once I've got the information back, I then will do a mail merge to the young person. I will let the local authority know that the mail merge has been completed. I have been putting the main contact for the local authority on the letters that are going out, but I find it easier to put my details on that letter, because once the letters hit the doormats, the calls start coming in and we know that those letters have hit the doormats for that local authority and that the bilateral is working, which it is. It's now with these seminars, I'm getting more requests for the bilaterals, where I've sent everybody a bilateral agreement. Unfortunately, it may have gone missing. It may have gone to a contact that's no longer at the local authority, or it may have just been lost with all the emails and everything. So if you do need me to resend a copy of that bilateral, that's not a problem. I can get that done. With all the letters that are going out on the bilaterals, the uptake has been really, really good. The JICEs have had a 54%, where the young person is now engaged with locating their account, and the CTFs have had a 72% uptake, where the young person is engaged locating their account. So if you haven't signed, let's get these young people relocated with their accounts and make a difference for them. They always, when they phone up, they do say, oh, I didn't know I had this. This is great, especially around Christmas time. If they've got kids, they say, I can get my child an extra present for Christmas. So it makes me really happy that these bilaterals are working. If you do need to have more information regarding the bilaterals, just drop me an email and I'll put my email in the chat for you. Right, the Care Leaver Covenant. There's a link on the slides that we're going to send to you if you requested them. Just click onto that, and it shows you opportunities for care leavers, education, training, and employment. As Sian was going over the bank details and identification, Metro Bank are really engaged with helping these young people get these bank accounts opened. And the LA engagement, there's another link there that will give you all the information regarding the LAs. And this is a really good one, the Reese Foundation. This is where they are lifelong supporters for care leavers. And there was a story that came out and I heard about where a care leaver that was in his 70s, 80s, didn't have a bed. He couldn't afford to buy a bed. So someone gave him this link and they supplied a bed for him. So he was really happy that he could get a good night's sleep. And there's the step ladder of achievement. And this is for care leavers between 18 and 25 years. And there's the Money Helper with the link, which gives care leavers information about how to deal with money. And then there's the Share Foundation website. So if you've got any questions, just drop us an email because we are here to help. And that's me. Thank you. Any questions so far? Okay.
Sorry, I've stopped sharing the screen now. So if you do have any questions, now's your opportunity. I know one of the things I mentioned in the introduction was the eligibility of a junior ISA. So a young person would need to have been in care for at least 12 months without any breaks before they're submitted to us by the local authority or healthcare trust. So the young person would need to be living in the UK to be eligible for the junior ISA. Young person would not be born in the Child Trust Fund years, unless of the reasons that Sian has already indicated, where they are not going to be eligible for a Child Trust Fund. And then, yes, they can be having a junior ISA. We can open up a junior ISA account for them, assuming they meet all the other criteria. And obviously the last one being that they can't be 18 at the time.
So if anybody does want to have the copy of the slides, just drop the request in the chat and we'll get these slides to you. Thank you.
Thank you. You've just seen the requirements there. Who wants a copy? So if no one's got any more questions, I mean, please do disappear if you want to. We'll be here until the end. So if you do have any other questions and you want to raise them now, please do. If not, then we are always available. 01296 310 400. I put Dagmar's email address in the chat, but otherwise info@sharefound.org. Or if you're a local authority, you will have an LA representative from the Share Foundation. So do feel free, obviously, to contact your normal LA representative. And thank you. Thank you for coming to this. And I hope you found it really useful and that you go to other seminars and learn a little bit more about all the other things that we're doing at the Share Foundation. Thank you, Louise. Thank you, Tricia. Bye-bye. Thank you, Megan. And Carol, if you have any questions. No, that's fine. I'll stop recording now then.